Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to our today's webinar. The topic is early ransomware detection and response. And I will not be alone. I have two guests. One is Pavel, our CTO.
Hi, everybody.
A special guest who will be demonstrating some capabilities that we have in terms of ransomware live. And very warm welcome to the second special guest, Juraj Pribyl, from NN Insurance Group, director of their SOC team. Hi, Juraj. I hope that we haven't lost you for good.
Oh, I'm here. I was saying hi already, so.
Cool. All right, it seems that we are all set and ready. So in that case, let's start with the presentation. Now, to open this discussion, let's really have a look into numbers, because ransomware is something that we all know. We've heard of it, but the data can show us a little bit more and give us some ideas on how ransomware impacts. And what I want to demonstrate here with these numbers is really how small and easy ways are there to actually intrude and steal someone's data or encrypt someone's data. And the methods used are very common, and they are the same for a very long time. Number one is, and probably will be, email phishing. That's probably the easiest thing, because sending an email to someone who's not knowledgeable or who's not paying attention and asking them to click somewhere or download an attachment is fairly easy, because people are still not educated, they're not paying attention. So that means that's an easy way for victims. Through RDP, which is on decline. We'll see if we will be talking about this today a little bit more, because some parts of our presentation will be more about a discussion. And then different software vulnerabilities. Now, looking at what actually happens after the initial infection and data encryption, we can have a look into reports that track these activities. In terms of encryption itself, three quarters of attackers were able to succeed in actually encrypting data, which is a very worrying number. And about a quarter of all attacks could have been stopped. Wouldn't, if there was enough attention, if there was enough maybe tooling, if there was enough processes in place. And we are going to show you today some examples on how to. In terms of the breakout time, it usually takes 3 days, at least 3 days, or 9 days in average, for the actual impact to strike since initial infection. And what was very surprising to me is that data breach in cloud actually takes about half of the cases. So being in cloud doesn't mean that we are protected. Being in cloud means that we have our data stored somewhere with some third party that we still need to protect ourselves. And what is the actual protection? In most of the cases, when we meet companies, they usually invested heavily in protecting their perimeter. They invested in being able to block traffic that's incoming, but they are not that much protected from insider threats or protecting their data in cloud. So we see that there is definitely a very big portion of companies who have covered their endpoints well, so that they can pick up attacks targeting these devices. But still, if these 2 points are covered, there is a vast area of network between these 2 points where attackers can work, and they usually do it this way to evade security and be undetected. Because of this, on average, it may take close to 200 days to identify a breach, which is very worrisome. Now, there are definitely ways how we can cover the network part between perimeter and endpoint. And there are ways how we can pick up on bad activities and bad actors. We need to be looking for scattered footprints. If you want to upload and install some malicious code onto a station, you need to be able to transfer the file to the station, which is usually done through network, where we can see this activity. If you want to infect someone through the internet, you need to communicate, and inherently, those activities will be visible on the network. So, what are the techniques that we should leverage? We already mentioned perimeter and endpoint, and I'm just trying to explain how important it is to also cover network that is looking for these scattered footprints in order to be able to cover all the gaps. And looking at security events from perspective of MITRE ATT&CK framework, we can see that network monitoring and detection can be very powerful in detecting attacks in many of their stages. And it is a great technique how you can multi-layer your security to be holistically covered. Pavel, you are the author actually of this picture. Would you like to go more into detail and add something to this?
Yeah, I would like to point out that perimeter protection and endpoint protection, the main purpose is to prevent the breach. So these tools are very useful to prevent exploitation, to prevent getting the privileged access, getting the overall access and persistence in the environment. So that's their strong part. But when it fails, then these tools are pretty weak in subsequent stages of the attack. In fact, they don't have any visibility, any further control. So that's exactly why you can see the graphics, as you can see, where are the strong parts or strong aspects of those technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that network helps, especially in the later stages after the initial breach has been done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, mechanisms that we can leverage to cover the network and actually be able to pick up attacks in all these different stages that we just presented. We can leverage really a plethora of methods. Flowmon specifically uses different data sources. We mainly rely on flow data. Using our approach, we can enrich this data with some L7 application visibility, and we call it enriched network telemetry. We're also able to pick up NetFlow IPFix from third-party sources, routers, switches, firewalls, etc. We're able to ingest raw packet data, so we're sending actually traffic to Flowmon probes that picks up whatever is interesting in it. You're also able to see user identity, and we use this not necessarily for detection, but for providing better detail on the incidents. We also support IDS signatures, so you're able to take intrusion detection signature-based technologies that you are familiar with from perimeter, and you can run them in the network, which gives you a great benefit of being able to pick up on attacks that hide or don't go through the perimeter, and still use signatures and be quite precise in the detection. And we have inbuilt customer threat intelligence. We call them B patterns. Oh, sorry. We have threat intelligence databases of known attackers and blacklisted IP addresses, etc. All this data goes through a detection engine that covers data from multiple or using multiple approaches and algorithms, machine learning, adaptive baselining, heuristics, behavior patterns, and more. There's a great reading on these methods in our resource library, so feel free to go and open Flowmon ADS brochures or articles to read more. And then we have a threat anomaly that is detected, that is alerted on, and can be even automatically responded to when the system is integrated with third-party tools, such as Fortinet. And we had a webinar on this topic just 2 weeks ago, so you can find it on our YouTube channel. Now, this is a new concept, network detection and endpoint detection together with SIEM system that collects logs from all these systems is actually called Security Visibility Triad, or SOC Visibility Triad. And the concept has been here for years and years. It's just been given a name, a label now. And we will be covering this topic more and more in our documents and collateral. When using network detection and response to complement endpoint parameter detection, then there are multiple benefits that we get. It's definitely reduction of risk. So that means being able to see risky assets on the network and being able to pick them up before something happens means that we are reducing the chance that someone will misuse a vulnerability, RDP service, etc., to get to your data. It helps you with threat hunting time reduction, because having early detection and having all the details that you need in order to make decisions means that you don't have to spend that much time on actually analyzing what happened. Then you have all the data at your disposal. And last but not least, it is about breach impact minimization, because the sooner you're able to respond, the less impacted you will be. Now, because we can tell you whatever we believe is the right thing, but we base our decisions and ideas on the real world. And to show you the real world, we're actually really happy to have Juraj Pribyl to accept our invitation. Juraj Pribyl has been a CISO for many years, usually in finance, in finance, in banking environments, and for the last over 4 years, I believe it is, Juraj, you are a SOC manager for NN Insurance.
Yeah, that's correct.
From 12, 13 countries, is that correct?
Yeah, 24/7.
24/7. So you must be a busy man, and I wonder how you sleep at night. Anyway, Juraj, thank you very much. The word is yours, and if you can share some experience on how in your SOC you are handling ransomware and how are you dealing with it, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Prague. So this is definitely not exhaustive list how to handle ransomware. I try to put some sort of best practice from our perspective, what we are usually doing when we are hit by an attack. So first, of course, you need to analyze ransomware, extract IOCs, so indicators of compromise, so URLs, hashes, IP addresses. That's the definitely very first step. And once you are starting doing response basically, and also preparation for next attacks, I would propose definitely to block all incoming emails based on IOCs, of course, remove emails from user mailboxes, which now with Office 365, I guess most of you is using. It's pretty swiftly 2 clicks and it's done. Of course, then block malicious URLs for access on proxies, identify workstations that visited malicious URLs, identify workstations that downloaded payload with IOCs, and of course, which executed certain files, usually via some sort of EDR tooling which you have in place. Then for ransomware calling home, how we call it, definitely block traffic on IPS, firewalls, and proxies. And very important is to prevent out-of-office workstation from connecting to the network until they've been scanned, because then you can go back to the 0.0 basically. And of course, create new CVM role for based on IOCs for future infections. At the same time, in parallel way, what we always do is start awareness campaign. So put some article on the intranet or with direct mail shots to your users. So that's pretty much from like a SOC analyst perspective, I would say, and incident response plans perspective. And now we can go to the more generic recommendations. So of course, know your environment, because how it usually is, you have somewhere some server which nobody knew about, and suddenly there is some Citrix with vulnerable version running on. So for me, asset discovery and so-called CMDB is super important. Especially, I would even suggest to have a SOC their own CMDB compiled from, for example, vulnerability scans, internal CMDB, and everything what you can put together and keep it some sort of separate database for you. Because as we know, to have a CMDB which is accurate, it's probably a live unicorn. Anyway, then network segmentation. This is something which will definitely help with spreading. Definitely another important thing is to have tested contact list. Maybe it sounds funny, but believe me, this is thing which will hamper your time response pretty quickly if you do not have the right names and contacts. And doomsday backups, which are now really really important, especially for this. So recovery time or objective for critical systems. Test your backups, because if they are just lying there somewhere offsite, and if you do not have the right procedures for this testing, it will definitely not help you. Off network and offsite, that's a strong recommendation. The same, your recovery plan should be probably available offline if you are hit by ransomware. That's another tip. And of course, the restoration tool, it's pretty much the same. What we find, or we have a feeling that it's really important to cooperate with network teams and establish a procedure with guys where you can basically shut down the branch or business unit or even country from your network and stop the communication with other business units. In case the country is infected, you can save at least other business units. And the least pleasant thing, of course, is to prepare the PR communication, third parties, media, customers, regulatory bodies, to be ready to answer some important questions. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I know we can talk about it for another hour, but this should be only a short taste how we are approaching it. So thanks for attention.
Thank you very much, Juraj. How often do you have to go through these steps?
Well, I don't want to share anything confidential, but it's a few times per year, definitely. Last month something happened as well in the very far east, but that's all I can say.
Thank you very much for giving us this more practical view and also more broad view. And maybe one other question that I have on you: how is it different being a Chief Information Security Officer from being a SOC manager? How did your daily routine changed?
Well, if you have the setup when you are a CISO who is running also the SOC, that's even more responsibilities. But when I was a CISO, it was more about strategies, planning, coordinating countries, trying to push some projects and everything. And I realized I want to do the real security. I want to be bothered every hour, every day with some strange phone calls and issues. And I just like it because this is the real deal. And we are experiencing basically every day something new. You are never bored, and adversaries are always ahead of you. So it's kind of a never-ending story. But I'm really enjoying this job. So the difference you have to be really on your toes all the time and expect the worst. And we have a big poster in our SOC which says you were already breached, you just don't know about it, and that's our life.
You just made Pavel really happy to hear that strategies is it's better to do hands-on technical stuff.
For me, it is. I'm enjoying it. So thanks for asking.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Juraj. Right, so Pavel should have the presenter right now. Okay, we can see your screen, great. And you can now jump into the demo and show us what you've prepared.
Okay, so before we do really the live demo, I would like to set up the story. So how these things can happen. Artur gave you a general overview of some examples, and I would like to tell you a very specific story. So imagine that you have a colleague who just returned back from a business trip. He was for 2 weeks traveling over the world, and he was connecting his laptop to all the networks around without the corporate protection, and he got infected. So it means that the endpoint protection on the device was not able to prevent it, and for your corporate protection, it's already too late because the infected device just get connected to your corporate network. So now the attacker has access to your environment, and he will start a typical set of activities. So first step when you reach the new environment is to look around and understand what kind of systems are available there, what kind of services can be poisoned to spread the presence in the environment. So the attacker is doing a discovery to understand what is around, how he can get persistence in more systems, where some interesting data is available. So that's his first step. This discovery leads to usually some critical resources in the environment. So usually a Samba server that is keeping the company data. So what the attacker is actually doing, he is trying to get unauthorized access to the environment. So he can take a list of known logins and passwords, and he can try so-called password spraying attacks. So he's just testing the well-known combinations, which is kind of naive technique, but it works in many cases. If it does not work, there are other ways how to get in. So, for example, Windows Remote Desktop Service, that can be target of a password spraying attack as well, but that can be also a target of an exploitation of a known vulnerability. So in this case, in this example, we'll see how the attacker is actually abusing the blue key vulnerability to get unauthorized access to a server using RDP protocol. So now when the attacker is on the server, he can do basically whatever he wants on that server, like installing a keylogger, which means that now the attacker is actually able to capture all the user input, which may include login and password data. So in this case, the attacker was able to retrieve the password for the Samba share. So subsequently, he can download, and he will download, as you will see in the live demonstration, a bunch of data. So as a next step, you as an attacker, you want to do something with the data. You want to have the data. So you do data exfiltration. There are different ways how to do it, obviously, but this activity will leave a footprint in the network. Again, the naive approach might be to just take the data and upload it to an FTP server or whatever service you want to do it through, but there are more advanced ways. So you can use an alternative communication channel. In this case, the attacker actually split the data file into chunks, and he's using ICMP. So he is pinging the data out of the network in the payload of ICMP packets, which is pretty smart technique because usually nobody pays attention to ICMP traffic, and it easily slips beyond the radar in the network. And the last step, logically, is to do an impact, is to monetize the activity. So as an attacker, you would probably encrypt the data on the network share, so the data is no longer useful, it's no longer usable for the company. So that would be the last step before the real monetization, which means that the victim usually finds a couple of hours or days later an email saying, pay that specific amount of bitcoins to get back your data through an encryption key. Or if you have backups and you don't want to pay for retrieving the data, you should pay for not disclosing the data to the internet, because the attacker already has a copy of it. He usually proves it by attaching one of those files to that email. So then he is asking for money for not disclosing the data. So the attack, as I have described it at the moment, that's something I have live here in my system. So basically, that's something you can see on our anomaly detection system. And I will guide you through the anatomy of the whole attack. So I mentioned that it started with a port scanning, with a network discovery. So what we see is an IP address of the attacker, and we see two different activities that have been detected and reported. The first one is called ARP scan, which refers to looking for devices that are around the attacker and that are powered on, that are active on the network. And second attack is actually the port enumeration on those devices. So the attacker is looking for services that are available on those three IP addresses that he has discovered. This activity is followed by a password spraying attack, which we can see as an activity called Samba dictionary attack. So this way, the anomaly detection system is actually distinguishing legitimate network sessions from those where the attacker is trying to get unauthorized access, and he's testing different logins and different passwords. The attack continued with poisoning the Windows Remote Desktop protocol. So let's now drill into more details. So we have an attack against Windows Remote Desktop, and I will say even details. So I will ask for more details on that activity. And you can see that the system tells me there are some related intrusion detections. And in fact, on those details, you can see how the BlueKit vulnerability has been exploited to get an unauthorized access to Windows Remote Desktop. So this is the detail showing additional context, additional enrichment with intrusion detection events as part of the RDP attack or RDP anomaly detected and reported by Flowmon ADS. So we continue in our attack with an activity where the attacker has downloaded the data from the Samba server. He was able to get the password to the keylogger, so now he downloaded 2 gigabytes of data. And now it's going to be really interesting, because the next step is data exfiltration. There are multiple detection techniques in anomaly detection system. There is the general observation of data upload anomaly outside of the protected environment. but there is also a very specific detection that looks into anomalies and deviations of the ICMP protocol. So in this case, we'll go for the even details to explain more about the detection. It's common that there is no payload in ICMP packets. In fact, if there is some payload, it's highly suspicious. So that's exactly the situation we are facing. In event details, we see the IP address of the attacker, the MAC address, so we see basically the source of the traffic. We see the destination of the traffic. We can look to even evidence, which means we can see the flow records, we can see the network telemetry that was used to detect that specific event, and we are able to drill down to full packet level. So in fact, we have a forensic evidence of that attacker activity in the network that we can download, and we can open that PCAP for additional analysis. So using tool like Wireshark, I'm able to open that packet trace, and I'm able to find actually the ICMP traffic within the PCAP. So what I can see is in the first ICMP packet, there is the name of exfiltrated file, and in subsequent packets, I can see chunks of the data that is being exfiltrated from the network. So in fact, I have very detailed evidence for subsequent analysis directly available as details for the specific events. There is also a demonstration of detection based on reputation data. So when we already know about a specific IP for being malicious or a specific domain or whatever the indicator of compromise is, we can easily detect and report on such communication from your network to that botnet command control center, for example. And the last step of the attack, as you've seen, there was data encryption. We do have a specific detection technique, specific heuristic algorithm that will identify suspicious traffic to Samba network shares. So that suspicious activity usually indicates that there is a malicious process encrypting the data on your network share. So that's the last step. Obviously, when you get to this stage, it's already too late. But as you can see, or as you have seen, there is a whole bunch of indicators of compromise that are being detected and reported in your environment before the real impact actually happens. So usually you have time to understand that something is not normal, that there are malicious activities in the network, and these activities are properly classified according to their characteristics. So that was from the live demonstration, and I think it makes sense to wrap it up. So the last slide is actually summarizing what you have seen. So this demonstration was actually based on real network activity, real packet captures that I have replayed in my isolated lab environment. So all that activity was simulated on the network level. So from the perspective of the detection system, it's like if it's happening in real time in the network. We have ingested into the detection system flow data, obviously, that's the basics. We have ingested reputation keys, intrusion detection signatures, and full packet data. So that's all these kind of different input data that we process. We have demonstrated various detection algorithms using different principles behind, going from advanced techniques such as machine learning or adaptive baselining, down to standard approach using reputation data, signature based, which is kind of a common technique, how to detect different kinds of malicious activities. And the evidence we have provided, it's the events itself that's the most important, to be able to automatically recognize that activity. We provided subsequent network telemetry for the detected events. And of course, when relevant, there is a full packet capture available for forensic analysis. So that's all from the demonstration, and passing the word back to you, Artur.
Thank you very much, Pavel. I will, do you know what, actually keep the presenter.
Okay.
If you can just go through the last 2 slides, that would be great. But before we get there, we have quite a few questions, actually. So let's try to answer at least a few of them. So the first one goes, given that ransomware can hang around for ages before doing anything malicious, how do you ensure your backups are not corrupt?
But yeah, that's the hard one. Well, there's no single magic bullet or silver bullet how to do it. You need to do the backup in stages. So typically you do full backups once a week, for example. You do incremental backups probably every day. That really depends on the granularity of the data and of that application. And then it depends on how much you want to invest, because it's only about the data retention for those backups. If you keep the backups for last 1 month, then that's the history you can go back. So maybe you need 2 months, maybe you need half a year, maybe you need some testing procedure, so you can do a recovery of the full backup. You can do it automatically every week, every month, and you can check if the files are corrupted. But again, some of them might be encrypted, some of them not. So that's pretty difficult.
I would also add, try to shorten the time of detection, right?
True.
And the numbers that we've seen at the beginning of the presentation are, those are organizations who are not equipped with techniques of detecting or not well. So try to be able to detect early and respond so that you don't have to back up ages to the history.
Early detection is the key, because usually the footprint is there, and you need to be able to point it out that something malicious is happening in your environment.
And the question that we have, and I'm not, I believe this question came when you were talking about initial infection, when you were showing the screens of the attacker station. And the question is, why not build a kennel to stop it? Mind you, if that word, you guy will have less money to make. So kennel, does it ring a bell?
I'll see if I get the question right.
Can you see the question on my screen, or is it too far away?
It's too far away. Can you just show it to me this way?
Sure, right here.
Well, there are, of course, ways how to.
And can you repeat the question, maybe, for the audience in your words?
How I understand the question is, what are the options actually to stop the activity at the very beginning? So I would say because our domain is early detection, so when the preventive measures didn't stop the malicious email to be delivered or the URL to be opened and the dropper to download some malicious payload and execute. So when all these things failed and you have early detection, you don't just have to detect. You can respond to that by blocking the network communication. So for example, if you have an infected device that is under the control of the attacker, you recognize that and you block it on the perimeter, then the device is still malicious, but it's already lost its communication channel to the botnet command control to the attacker. So you have time to then deal with the infection. Or if you have the option how to quarantine the host, so if you have, for example, network access control, so you will take the infected device and you will put it into quarantine VLAN, which means, yes, it can go to the public internet, but it cannot reach the internal systems. So again, you have active response, and then probably the attacker is not able to encrypt the data, is not able to exfiltrate the data, so he doesn't have anything to ask you to pay him for.
Excellent, thank you very much. So let's move forward with our presentation. If you would mind to go to the next slide, please.
Yes.
We have created a ransomware detection site or page on our website. So I recommend you to go and have a read. We will be creating more content around it, but we've been covering ransomware for quite a while. And I'm sure that if you search for ransomware on our website, you'll find a few interesting blogs. And we will keep it coming. And I also believe that this use case will once make it in some form to our public demo, right?
Yes, actually pretty soon. We believe in July we will publish a completely new Flowmon demo based on Flowmon version 11, where those use cases such as ransomware detection, but also things like cloud application monitoring will be demonstrated.
So on our website, there's a button on the upper right corner to access our demo. And as Pavel mentioned, soon this will be available in there as well. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Pavel, for your appearance today. Thank you, Juraj, very much for your experience. We will share the recording on our YouTube channel in a few days, and you will receive a link to it in a follow-up email soon as well. I'll be looking forward to hear you on the next event. Do we have next slide where?
Yes.
Where we want to invite you to Flowmon Day that will be held on June 17th in 3 different time zones, and it will go. It will not only cover this ransomware demo that you demonstrated today, but it will show you news, it will show you our roadmap, it will show you our vision, and product managers will demonstrate some great new features live as well. So, looking forward to meeting you soon. Take care of yourselves, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Goodbye.